So what's up, people, and welcome to another episode of Comics, Animations, and Movies. So as you may know, the very first episode of Volume 6 of RWBY has recently come out. And it's of course been a much anticipated volume or episode, and there are many reasons for that, but one of them was that Volume 5 received a lot of criticism from a lot of fans with regards to the quality of the story and various things in the animation going down. And so it looked like Rooster Teeth, took a little bit of time, sat back and looked at the series and tried to decide what they needed to do to improve it. And so, of course, episode 1 of Volume 6 was very much anticipated by everybody. And from a first glance, from my perspective, I don't know if they've gotten everything right or if they've gotten even a lot of things right. But yeah, there's a lot of hope with regards to things going out. I think they did a pretty good job, from my opinion anyway. And so I just wanted to give a quick commentary. So going over many things. Let's start with the animation. The animation is absolutely beautiful. It really is. It's been that way since they switched from Poser to Maya. But what was interesting is, as much as it became beautiful, I really didn't like the switch because of the fact that it went from very unique sort of art deco style that they had in Poser to a very mundane, standard, animation style that you see in a lot of the AAA rated animation, Disney and Dreamcast and such. And so as beautiful as it was, it felt like just another animation from another one of these big companies. And what's nice about what I saw in this one, and this may just be my imagination, is the color styles that they chose seemed a little bit more back to what they had in the past. It felt a little bit more off color, a little bit more Art Deco-ish, and I'm not sure if that's what's done purposely or whether it's just this particular episode. But it looks very beautiful like they had in Volume 4 and Volume 5, but it has a little bit more of the unique character that they had in Volume 1, 2, and 3, in the sense that it doesn't look like your standard, AAA rated animation. The colors don't feel the same. They're not as bright, bluish, yellowish, greenish that you see in a lot of these animations. It seems a little bit subdued, but there's enough contrast to make it strike out. And so I really like the animation and the color choices that they made in this particular episode. Now, whether that will be the case as it goes on, I don't know. And to be honest, once they get to Atlas, I hope that they do retain some of the colors that they had in Volume 4, especially of the series, because Atlas was one of the few areas where it was really strikingly beautiful. Atlas is a very cold area of Remnant, and the bluish, ice-ish, that color, the icy blue colors that you saw there were really well done. And so I hope that they do bring that back, but still retain it with some of the characteristics that they had in the first 3 volumes, so that RWBY has that kind of unique look and feel that's different from Disney and all the other standard mainstream animation. Anyway, so with that regards, the animation looks pretty. The story, well, it's a little bit hard to say. I mean, it's starting off right where it left off in the last story. And overall, I think it looks pretty good. It's too early to say yet. I mean, they started off this particular episode the way a lot of, you see it in a lot of movies like, Avengers 2, Age of Ultron, or James Bond, Quantum of Solace, where it starts off with action. It immediately starts off with action. And you get sucked right into the story where you see everybody in battle. You saw that with Avengers 2, where they were infiltrating the, Hydra base. And you saw that with Quantum of Solace when James Bond was immediately being chased by the enemy. And here it's the same sort of thing. They're on a train and they're being attacked by Grimm, and they're fighting the Grimm. And overall, the action seemed pretty good. The nice thing about it is then they, of course, cut back to what happened right before that particular battle. Everything, why I like this particular episode is everything felt a little bit more in detail. One of the things I noticed about Chapter 5 was that it was kind of lacking in cohesiveness. Things just happened choppily. You just saw it bounce from one section to another, and you weren't exactly sure where the plot was going, what the details of the plot were. You saw some plot holes. It's like, what the heck is going on? And you don't see it as much here. Everything seemed to be a little bit more cohesive. They focused a little bit more detail so that the flow was working a lot better. And then they cut back to the battle again, and I thought that was pretty good. So overall, yeah, I give that a plus. Is the story good? I have no idea. I was hoping maybe that Team Junior might remain behind and it will be a smaller team. But yeah, okay, Junior comes along. That will be fine. And we're already seeing some efforts by Rooster Teeth to show a little bit more leadership qualities in RWBY as well as John. I'm not sure if it feels natural. Sometimes feels a little bit forced, but overall, that's not too bad. The one thing I do notice that it almost has this look and feel that, it's trying to go back to volumes 1, 2, and 3, the innocent lightheartedness now that Team RWBY's back. Oh, everybody's back, and let's get back to the original. But the whole point of the story was you really can't get back, right? I mean, they're beyond the age of innocence. They're beyond the naivety that they had in the first 3 volumes. So as happy as they may be now, they have to live with all the things that happened in volume 4 and 5. And some of the things don't feel completely there yet. Maybe it's just too early to tell. For example, the animosity that was created between Blake and Yang seems to have completely evaporated. I would rather have seen that, as much as they're trying to become friends again, that for the moment it's again a little bit forced between the two of them because they're putting a conscious effort to do so, but they can't forget about the trauma that they received in the past. And that will be a interesting thing to see. Right now, it just feels like they're buddies again. They're BFFs again. And it might be, good for the Bumblebee shippers. But to be honest, even for the Bumblebee shippers, I would feel that them having to work over the pains that were created in volume 4 and 5 would be an important thing. They're maybe supportive of each other, but they have to take the time to overcome the pains that were created in 4 and 5. And that will create a much more stronger bonding between the two characters. Now, I do have to say that I am not a fan of the Bumblebee ship. I am not an anti-fan of the Bumblebee ship either. I don't care, whichever way it happens. But if it's going to happen, then that's fine. If it's not going to happen, then I hope that they will still remain, sisters in arms and become really close comrades. In either case, it'll be interesting to see. And on a similar note, I would like to see that sort of situation with Weiss as well. I mean, they're going to Atlas. And right now, she's her bubbly, usual Weiss, kind of bragging sort of self again, the Princess Weiss sort of self again. But as they get closer and closer to Atlas, I'm hoping that she starts becoming a little bit anxious, a little bit stressed, worried because of the fact that she's returning from the place that not only she was exiled from somewhat, but also the place where she kind of left as a criminal almost. And so she's going back to the place where her major enemy, her father, has complete or a strong dominance over. And so as strong as she is now with Team RWBY back together again, I would think that there will be a significant amount of anxiety starting to build up in Weiss to have to go back to where she, has so much stress left in that area. And what I would think is that it's something that she may not want to talk to the rest of the team with because it's so close and so personal. But it may be something that hopefully somebody like RWBY will help bring out. It may require a slap in the face by RWBY to say, don't you trust us enough to be able to support you. You know, it's kind of the same way if you recall, in One Piece, Luffy punched out Vivi that one time when Vivi was trying to make things a lot easier for them in Alabasta. And Luffy was like, if we are your nakama and you trust us as being your nakama, then why don't you send us into the battle, you know, instead of keeping us safe? You know, why don't you trust us enough to be able to help us risk our lives the same way that you're risking your life? And that might be the same sort of, speech that I would like to see somebody like RWBY, maybe even Blake, you know, who's also had a similar sort of incident do. But it'll be interesting to see how this goes. I'm hoping that there will be a complexity thing going on with, Weiss's personality, because you saw that in Volume 4. It was one of the highlights of Volume 4. It was one of the best parts of Volume 4. And I don't want it to become lighthearted and lose that depth that they created in Volume 4. Anyway, one last thing is the fight scenes. This is probably the most important thing for me because that's why I started watching the series. I would have to say that they're going in the right direction. They're not yet there yet. And there is something that I will say. I was a little bit bored with the fight scenes, but if you look at it from not a visceral perspective, but more from a practical perspective, I think they've changed things quite well. First of all, Weiss is no longer the constant summoner. She used to be, a warrior, and then in Chapter 5, or Volume 5, I should say, all of a sudden all she was doing was summoning, and was like, will you just stop summoning and become the warrior that you were? And the fight scenes that she had were just awful in Volume 5. It looks like she was kind of prancing around like a somebody like a Powerpuff Girl or something like that, and it's like, what happened to your fighting skills? You know, you're just summoning left, right, and center, and that's all you do now. Now she's gone back, and she looks like she has a much more better balance between all of her skills. And in fact, it was nice that she didn't summon during that entire battle. I mean, I figure that will come back, her summoning skills, but it's much more balanced with the things that she can do with her glyphs and her, her weapon skills, as well as her summoning. And if she doesn't need the summoning because the summoning is her trump card, then she shouldn't have to use it. The biggest thing I would hope, and this is really not a criticism, I think the camera angles look good. I think the creativities of the moves were pretty good. And I think the overall, the movement, the movement mechanics were pretty good. The only thing I had an issue with was the pacing. The pacing felt very slow. I mean, if you go back to, again, I always use the reference point as the RWBY Red trailer, the very first one, or the Yang Yellow trailer, the very first one. If you go back and look at the speed at which these characters are fighting, and then come back to look at what you see in Volume 6, Volume 6 feels extremely anemic. I think that the complexity of the moves aren't bad. And in fact, the camera angles were really good. There was that one part which I really liked when Weiss released her glyphs, and RWBY actually was the one that jumped from one glyph to the other and looked really good. The angles were good. The only thing was it felt slow. And so I come back. The reason why I felt a little bit bored watching that was not because it was bad animation in terms of fight choreography. It just felt slow. It felt like, if you look at Captain America Winter Soldier, for example, it has some of the best fights around, even in the Marvel series. If you took that and watched it at half speed, it would be far less interesting. And that's what I felt with regards to this one. Just bring up the speed of the fighting area by 30%. Just run it faster, and I think it will be a lot better. The other thing is the use of sound. Somewhere along the way, I think they lost the use of sound. I mean, Again, coming back to Captain America Winter Soldier, if you recall, one of the important nice things was the use of sound. When Winter Soldier hit his metal hand against the metal surface, that sound of clashing that you heard was so impactful. It really added depth to the fighting. Here, it just wasn't there. It should be punching you. The sound should be punching you right in the gut. And I don't see that in this particular point. And because of that, it just feels boring again. And finally, I should say, please, please, please have them stop talking to each other excessively during the entire fight scenes. It's not that much of a criticism because they have reduced the the amount of talking that they do. But if you look at the dialogue, let's take something that Monty Oum is really famous for aside from RWBY, which is Dead Fantasy. If you look at Dead Fantasy, it's a silent film. I mean, aside from the music, there is nothing in terms of talking. There's a few words, and they're all in Japanese for some reason. I have no idea why. Like ikuwayo. I remember Tifa saying that. But aside from that, there is no talking, and it doesn't matter because the action is so good. You're just glued to your seat watching that. And here, you're watching the pacing, and as slow as the pacing is, at least there's pacing, and then there's dialogue that just destroys whatever pacing there is. So please, I understand that it's supposed to be a little bit more lighthearted and supposed to be comical, but not during a fight scene. And that's one thing I'm hoping Rooster Teeth understands. I mean, if you look at a lot of the series that are out there, whether you take Dragon Ball Z or whether you take One Piece, both are very comical series. But once they get into a fight, forget it. It is dead serious. Here, you see these comical things that happen right between that. At least they got rid of the comical action, which is something I absolutely hated in Volume 4 and Volume 5. They would have, Nora spinning around, laughing as she's fighting somebody. It's like, what the heck is all this? That's gone. And thank you for getting rid of that. But now please get rid of those comical dialogues. Just have serious fighting when you have serious fighting. And then you could go back to comical once everything is over. That's how RWBY Volume 1 was. And I hope that they go back to it again. Even Volume 2's food fight, during the fight, was quite serious. Afterwards, it went back to being comical again. So I hope that they get rid of the dialogue, or else, it'll end up being the bad things that you remember in a series like Bleach. The, haha, I knew that you were going to do that, and that's why I did this, I'm going to do this move. And then the other guy goes, aha, I knew that you knew that I was going to do this move and you were going to do that move. So now I'm going to do this move. And then the other guy goes, aha, I remember. And it just went on. And it killed my interest in Bleach. And I hope that they don't do that with RWBY. But overall, it looks pretty good. And I do want to say congratulations to Rooster Teeth. You've gone through six volumes, 6 seasons of this thing, and it's a very popular and very nice series. So good job, Rooster Teeth. Congratulations on your success. And I think Miles Luna and Gary Shawcross should get applause for that, despite all the criticisms with regards to the series. Okay, well, that's about it for this episode. It went longer than I expected, so I apologize. But thank you very much for listening. And if you have any comments on how you feel about RWBY Volume 6, Episode 1, and how this will go, then I would like to hear about that. But in any case, I hope you join us in the next episode of whatever the comics, animations, and movie episode will be. And until then, Jaya, nice day, everyone.